Hello student, myself HirenSir from GT Vidyalay, Rajkot. Today we are going to learn the first unit, Rise of British Rule in India. It is necessary for all of us to memorize and to keep in mind all details even for the future studies like exam of GPSC, UPSC, etc. So we will start the rise of British rule. As we know that since ancient time there was a big place, an incomparable position of India in the world due to its economic, cultural and religious inheritance. Due to the economic prosperity and cultural inheritance, so many people from the different part of the world they visited here to do the business. That is why there was a big demand for the Indian spices, muslin, silk, cloth, indigo, and also other goods in Europe. And this trade was doing between India and Europe through the land route and the sea route. At the center of this route, there was Istanbul or Constantinople located in Turkey. But what happened? After the conquest of the Constantinople in 1453 AD by the Turkish Muslim, that is why the sea route through the Constantinople was closed for the European, and since they could not do without spices and the European was feeling that they require all these things spices, muslin, silk, cloth, indigo, and that is why they were compelled to discover a new sea road. So they started anyhow to reach India for all this commodity. Now we will go for discovery of sea route to India. In the first instance, with the help of Portuguese King Prince Henry, some brave people had efforted to discover the new sea route. Many great men tried to discover sea route to India. Among them, one of was Bartholomew Dias, who discovered the Cape of Good Hope. With the economic assistance from the King of Spain, even Christopher Columbus began his adventure of discovering a new sea route, which again came to a stop at island presently known as West Indies, which was situated in Atlantic Ocean. Thereafter Columbus, who had believed throughout his life that he had discovered a new sea route to India, but actually he had discovered a new land. Since this clarification was made by Amerigo Vespucci, this new land began to be known as America after the name of the greatest sailor Amerigo Vespucci. Here you can see the sea route to India by which so many sailors had tried to come here, and here you can see the lower tip of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope, by which most of the sailors had tried to reach India. Now we will go for one of the greatest sailor, whose name was Vasco da Gama, who discovered the sea route to India in 1498. He reached Calicut in western coast, and at that time there was a king Jamorin, and he was also welcomed by Jamorin, and he was allowed to carry out business there. Thus This is considered as important event in the world. Because of this, the door was opened for the Europeans to come India and Portuguese who are the first to arrive in India to business uncontrolled territories like Diu, Daman, Goa. Thereafter Dutch came from Holland and Danish from Denmark arrived. So all these people settled down to do the business in India. So you will have to keep in your mind first was the Portuguese, thereafter Dutch from Holland and Danish from the Denmark. But the most successful among them, the European tribe, was the Britishers. In 1600 AD, at that time there was a Queen Elizabeth of England who gave the permission to the East India Company to carry out trade with the eastern country. So the first ship under the leadership of Captain William Hawkins arrived in Surat, but due to the dominance of and opposition from the Portuguese, they were not allowed to establish their trade there. But finally, the East India Company got the permission from the Mughal Emperor Jahangir, and British East India Company established its first trade center in Surat in 1613. So the company was established and also their trade centers in Surat, then Bharuch and Ahmedabad too. But due to the strong presence of the Maratha in this particular region, the company sensed danger for their existence. So they moved towards the south and east direction, where they set up their centers in Machilipatnam, St. George, Fort Williams, and Mumbai became their headquarters in 1687. So the French East India Company, which also arrived in India for trade in 1668 AD and eventually set up their trade centers in Mahe, Karaikal, Pondicherry, then Machilipatnam, etc. So this all European people settled down in India. Now we will go for some of the video which I have taken from YouTube for very easy to understand. So thanks for that.
The sea is rough and stormy, but these sailors from Portugal won't turn back. They are on their way to India to buy spices and then sell them in Europe, which will make them rich. They want to travel by sea because the journey is safer. The land route is an old route, but very dangerous due to wars in the Arab lands. Finally, India at last. The Portuguese, led by their captain, Vasco da Gama, land in Calicut, India in 1498. The first thing Vasco da Gama did on landing in Calicut was to meet the local ruler, or Zamorin. Let's listen to what they said. What is the reason for your visit? Your Highness, I have come from Portugal and wish to buy your famous Malabar spices. I request permission to trade here. What will we gain in return? I will give you a lot of money for your spices, and once I sell them, Malabar spices will become world famous. Very well, permission granted. All that you saw took place many years ago. Would you like to know what happened after that? After that, the Portuguese became the first Europeans to carry Indian spices abroad and sell them. The Portuguese made a lot of money and their country became rich. Soon, other Europeans like the Dutch in Holland, Danes in Denmark, and the French in France heard of this, and they too landed in India to trade in spices. Meanwhile, in England, some traders formed a company called the East India Company. In 1600, their queen gave them the Charter of Trade to trade with India and Asia. After getting the charter to trade, ships of the East India Company landed in India to trade in spices, cotton, and sugar. When the East India Company first came to India, the ruler was Jahangir, the Mughal emperor. Soon the British asked him for permission to start trading. The emperor allowed the British to set up a factory in Surat. This factory was actually a warehouse where they could store goods. The other European traders were angry. They did not want to share space with the British. It led to fights and wars amongst them for a long time. The Danish, Dutch, and the Portuguese lost to the British. They were left with just a few settlements in India. The French were the most powerful rivals. They fought 3 bitter wars, called the Carnatic Wars, with the British that lasted from 1746 to 1763. At the end of these wars, France was left with 2 trading posts, Pondicherry and Chandanagar, and the British became the main trading nation in India.
In this lesson, you learnt the Portuguese led by Vasco da Gama were the first to land on Indian west coast at Calicut in 1498. The Portuguese gained permission from local ruler Zamorin to trade in Malabar spices. Other foreign sailors such as the Dutch, the Danish, the French also came to India to trade in spices. In 1600, the Queen of England gave the East India Company the character to trade with India and Asia.